COVID test? Raise your hand. Let's see. Nate, tell me what it was like.
I was thinking about it because it broke my brain. I couldn't get it off my head.
I know, right? Same story here. So I had a COVID test about a month ago, and just about when I felt like it had poked my brain, they were pulling it out. No, it doesn't actually. It's not actually that bad. But I was kind of curious. I was afraid of getting a positive result, even though I knew I didn't have COVID. Fortunately, it came back negative. Now here's the interesting thing about this. People who are healthier than me are getting positive results. So I was sick with a cold, but people who don't have any symptoms are getting positives. So I've been wondering for a while, does this really make sense? Does it line up, or is there something fishy here? I'd like us to think about the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Like, people have lost their jobs, people have been depressed, people have died, that's for sure. It's not been good. But what has our reaction been based on? Has it been based on cases or test results? The reason we know who and who doesn't have COVID is based all on the testing. So everything about our world in regards to COVID has been changed based upon the test results. Does that make sense? That's the only reason why we reacted in a certain way. It all comes back to the testing. And so I really want to make the point today that we need to examine this. Is it right or is it not right? Is the testing up to par or is something wrong? And I think doctors, associations, and renowned clinics can all help us answer these questions. Now, first, we need to establish some standards for what makes a good COVID test, right? Okay, so let's go into that first. First, I need to explain something about a PCR test. A PCR test is a DNA sampling test. Okay, so basically, it takes genetic material and it amplifies the sample. According to the National Human Genome Research Institute, this is abbreviated as a polymerase chain reaction, or PCR. You don't have to remember the long name, I'm just going to be saying PCR. So Janowski, I'm going to call on you. Is DNA big or small?
Small.
Very small. Do we have to amplify it so we can see what's going on?
Yes.
All right. You get nerves.
Wow.
I had those nerves for so long, and Janowski, I kept thinking about it. He just kept wanting the nerves. Okay. Anyway, we're going to move on. Basically, this PCR test is the most common we're using right now. So according to Time Magazine, it's the majority of COVID-19 testing. This is the one we're looking at. Amplifies the sample to see if there's COVID in the genes, okay? Now, proper standards, what does that mean? According to Cambridge Dictionary, it's right or suitable for a particular situation or purpose. So basically, that means that the COVID-19 testing needs to fit the COVID virus. Now, two main criteria I want us to look at here. The first, it needs to be based on a proper virus. Whoever designed this test needed to build it on COVID-19, right? If you used a different virus, it wouldn't come out right. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. The second thing is that it needs to have the proper sensitivity rate. So let's put it like this. Like my RA comes into the room, it's room job check today, and he sees one crumb on the ground and he gives me demerits. Would that be being too sensitive? Yes, probably. Yes, definitely. Janowski's like, get those D's out of here. Yeah, no, right. Okay, so anyway, the test shouldn't do the same thing. If it sees one little virus that your body's going to kill off in no time, it shouldn't give you a positive result. And it should only be sensitive to COVID specifically. It shouldn't test positive for other things. Now, before we go into whether or not COVID-19 lines up with these standards, would you guys agree that these are good criteria to go off? Okay, so we can all basically say, yeah, these are good standards. Perfect. So now we're asking the question, is the testing up to par? Unfortunately, COVID-19 testing fails to meet these perfectly reasonable standards. It fails it miserably. The first is that the PCR testing is not meant for COVID-19. Okay, so basically, there's two parts under this. The original test creator was the first step. But the second step, I'm actually going to address that first, was the person who made the PCR test version for COVID. So he tweaked the design for his own uses. Now the guy I want to quote under here, his name is Dr. Fuelmick. He's a lawyer with a doctorate. He's a professional at researching, his evidence is bulletproof. And he's also not in the medical industry, so he's kind of objective from whatever may be going on there, we're not sure. Now what he said was the fellow who developed the PCR test didn't model it after COVID-19. he used a different virus. And he, quote, hoped that it would be sufficiently similar, end quote. So he was basically just hoping it would be the same, but it wasn't exactly the same virus. Secondly, the original creator didn't make it for diagnosis of any disease. According to, again, Dr. Fielman, quote, the inventor of the PCR test, Terry Mullis, has repeatedly emphasized they're simply incapable of diagnosing any disease, end quote. Think back to, what did we talk about? This is DNA modification, or not modification, but magnification, right? The person who made this made it for probably DNA magnification, not for diagnosing diseases. So the test that everyone is using right now is not even designed for diagnosing any disease, let alone COVID-19. So our criteria stated the test should be built on COVID-19 and should be for diagnosing COVID, but they're not. So the first criteria fails. Now you might be saying, oh, come on, the guy who made the test probably used like a similar virus, it's probably just fine. I'd say the stakes are too high to be quote unquote close enough. People have lost their jobs, people have been quarantined, people have been really depressed, all because of test results that may or may not be testing positive for COVID. So I think we need to get it exactly right. That the economic impact and other impacts are simply too large to just get close enough. Now, the other thing I'd like to address, there's actually two more. The first is that it's sensitive to too many types of virus, okay? So basically under here, just to set the record straight, according to the Mayo Clinic, if you have COVID-19, generally you'll get a positive result. We'll talk about that more, okay? But it also tests for other viruses and objects. So it does test positive for COVID. It also tests positive for other things, okay? So according to Dr. Fielman, quote, a positive result may happen because the test detects, for example, a piece of debris or a fragment of a molecule. And that may signal nothing else than that the immune system of the person tested won a battle with a common cold in the past. Who here has had a cold in their life? You all could test positive for COVID. So according to our criteria, a main factor is that COVID-19 tests only test for COVID, but the current tests return positive results for other viruses too. So again, it fails the sensitivity criteria. Now you might be saying, Ben, you're talking all about false positives. What about false negatives? Where does that come into play? I'd like to actually bring that into the discussion. According to the British Medical Journal, 2 to 29% of tests come back negative when the person actually does have COVID. But I don't think that takes away from our point here. All we're trying to establish is that COVID-19 testing is kind of wrong. If it's false positive or false negative, it's still false. It's not doing its job. So no matter which side of the aisle you're on, it's really not giving you the result that you're looking for. Now, lastly, let's look at the third thing. It tests positive for too little virus. The first thing is that it's very highly sensitive. So according to the advisory board, 90% of people, quote, have very low viral loads, end quote, who test positive for COVID. So you basically could barely have any. It's like the crumb on the ground, and you get demerits. Secondly, it detects virus that is not harming the person. According to the Association of American Medical Colleges, quote, adds Pritt, the test does not distinguish live virus from dead virus, end quote. So your body could have killed off COVID a month ago. It'll pick it up and give you a positive result. So on this basic level also, it fails the criteria. It's not the proper sensitivity. Now you might be saying safety first. We need to detect all the virus we possibly can. I don't think so, because personally, we don't need a positive result if we're not sick. So anyway, we've looked at basically 3 points under here today, right? We've agreed on 2 criteria, proper virus, proper sensitivity rate, but the COVID-19 testing fails both of these. It turns out that when I got a negative result, I could have been a false negative, or I could have just gotten lucky, because the chance of getting a positive result is extremely high. So basically, this entire economic impact has been based on faulty test results. Churches closed, jobs lost, people terrified because of false positives. I'd like to close with this quote from Dr. Fielman. Apparently, PCR tests, quote, tested positive in goats, sheep, papayas, and even chicken wings, end quote. So next time you eat chicken wings, beware. They might have COVID.